Perhaps you haven't noticed that a silent war has quietly started. But this time the battlefield is no longer the traditional smoke of gunpowder, but behind the global industrial chain. The two sides participating in this war are emerging economies represented by China on one side and European powers led by the United States on the other. And the focus this time is the core of future travel, the electric vehicle industry. In October 2024, the European Union further passed a resolution that China's electric vehicle industry relies on government subsidies and has seriously affected fair competition in the market. Next, they passed a proposal to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. It is worth noting that although countries such as Germany expressed strong opposition, the final vote still passed the tariff plan. 10 countries, including France and Italy, support an increase of up to 35.3% on the basis of the original 10% tariff, a total of up to 45.3% tariffs. 5 countries, including Germany and Hungary, voted against, and another 12 countries chose to abstain. So, in the face of these severe sanctions from the European Union, what kind of counterattack will China launch next? If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now, let's get into today's topic. With the advent of the 21st century, technological innovation has become the core driving force of economic development. And the electric vehicle industry is one of the key areas of this technological revolution. With its strong manufacturing capabilities and huge market demand, China has rapidly risen in this field, and many Chinese electric vehicle brands with global competitiveness have begun to emerge. However, this phenomenon makes the United States uneasy. As a former technological hegemon, the United States has felt unprecedented pressure in the face of China's rise. In order to maintain its hegemonic position, the United States subsequently suppressed China's electric vehicle companies in May 2024, attempting to exclude them from the future global industrial landscape. The United States has directly imposed tariffs of up to 100% on Chinese electric vehicles, which is undoubtedly a major trade blow. Of course, since the United States put pressure on China's electric vehicle industry, the European Union on the other side of the Atlantic has also begun to stir and is joining the trade war against China. In June 2024, the European Union, a loose alliance of 27 countries, united some member states under the leadership of France and imposed tariffs of 17.4%, 20% and 38.1% on several major Chinese automakers, including BYD, Geely, and SAIC Group. Other manufacturers were not spared and were generally subject to a 21% tariff. It is worth mentioning that after repeated mediation between China and EU countries, although the EU announced the results of its anti-subsidy investigation on Chinese electric vehicles in August and decided to reduce tariffs to between 17% and 36.3%, this is only temporary. Unless a company takes the initiative to request a hearing or most member states object to it, the proposal will be finally passed. Until September of this year, under pressure from some domestic automakers and China's international pressure, the EU once again lowered its anti-subsidy tariffs on Chinese cars, reducing the minimum tax rate to 17% and the maximum to 35.3%. Obviously, the EU still took into account its international relations with China in this decision. Although the tariff sanctions have not been completely lifted, the tariff range has been decreasing. However, surprisingly, when many people thought that the sanctions would gradually ease, the EU took further action against China's electric vehicles. In October 2024, the EU formally voted on the proposal to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, and it was passed. The voting results showed that 10 EU member states supported the proposal, 12 countries chose to abstain, and 5 countries including Germany and Hungary voted against it. According to the new plan, the EU will impose an additional tariff of 17.8% to 35.3% on the original 10% basic tariff, bringing the total tax rate to an astonishing level of 17.8%, to 45.3%. This policy will continue to be implemented for up to 5 years. According to EU rules, 2 very strict conditions must be met for a proposal to be officially shelved. First, at least 15 member states must vote against it. Second, the total population of these opposing countries must reach 65% of the total population of the EU. However, in this vote, neither of these 2 conditions was met. This also means that in the short term, the export of Chinese electric vehicles will face huge obstacles, and many Chinese brands may have to slow down or adjust their strategies in the European market. It is worth noting that in this proposal to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, some international big-name car companies also stood up to oppose sanctions on Chinese electric vehicles. BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, and others have issued statements, making it clear that the EU's approach is not feasible. They believe that the imposition of tariffs will not only fail to enhance the competitiveness of European automakers, but may also harm those companies that are actively doing business in the global market. What's going on? In fact, it is not difficult to understand why European local car companies oppose the imposition of tariffs. According to public data, German car companies such as BMW and Audi have sales in China that account for more than 30% of their company revenue. In 2023, the sales of German cars in the Chinese market exceeded 2 million. In contrast, from January to July 2024, China's automobile exports to Europe were only 825,000 vehicles, which is less than 60% of the sales of German cars in China last year when converted into annual sales. A more intuitive example is Volkswagen. In 2023, Volkswagen sales in Germany just exceeded 600,000 vehicles, while its sales in China exceeded 3.2 million vehicles, and its sales in the Chinese market accounted for more than 35% of its global sales. These data prove that although Chinese cars have performed well in the European market, European cars have far exceeded Chinese cars in Europe. For these car companies, maintaining good relations with China and maintaining market share in China is a key part of their global strategic layout. If the EU really implements these additional tariffs, China is likely to take the same measures to fight back. In the end, it will not only be China's electric vehicle companies that will be hit, but also these European car companies that rely on the Chinese market. So the question is, will China further fight back in the face of these unwarranted sanctions from the EU? In fact, China had already begun to take countermeasures as early as the EU announced the imposition of tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. In June 2024, China officially announced an anti-dumping investigation on pork exported from the EU, covering pork and its byproducts from the EU. This move may cause the EU's pork market share in China to decline significantly, and the sales volume is expected to drop by as much as 30% to 40%. Not only that, China has also launched anti-subsidy and anti-dumping investigations on agricultural products such as dairy products, brandy, and rapeseed from the EU. You know, in 2023, the total amount of dairy products and brandy exported by the EU to China reached about $10 billion, and the total amount of exports from the entire EU to China exceeded $280 billion. If China continues to increase sanctions, the EU's economy will be under tremendous pressure. Obviously, China's countermeasures are not only aimed at a single field, but also form an all-round attack on multiple industries in the EU. If these sanctions are further deepened, the economic impact faced by the EU will be very severe. What's more, the EU has now officially passed the proposal to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Previously, the EU frequently lowered its tariff proposals on Chinese automakers, largely out of concern that China might take countermeasures. When China sanctioned the EU, it actually had some reservations, hoping that the EU would stop its tariff sanctions on China's auto industry. However, now that the EU's proposal has been passed, China naturally does not have to worry about it. Judging from the current situation, China is likely to take more direct countermeasures against France, which was the first to take the lead in promoting the EU to impose tariffs on Chinese cars. You know, France is not only the largest agricultural producer in the EU, but also one of the world's major exporters of agricultural products and food. According to data from the General Administration of Customs of China, France is also China's largest source of agricultural product imports in the EU and its second largest agricultural product trading partner. As of 2023, France has more than 300 agricultural and food products approved for export to China, and nearly 7,000 agricultural and food product manufacturers are registered in China. China's total annual imports of agricultural products from France amount to $5.5 billion, while its exports of agricultural products to France are only $700 million. It is worth noting that the largest French brandy producer association has expressed concerns. They believe that if China really imposes tariffs on French products, it will be the last straw that breaks the camel's back. At present, the brandy industry itself is in trouble. Once the Chinese market is lost, their export volume will inevitably decrease by 25%. If China includes wine in the scope of countermeasures, France's wine exports will inevitably suffer a huge blow. In addition, other high-end agricultural products in France may not be spared. High-end ingredients such as foie gras, truffles, caviar, and ham, which are indispensable to French cuisine, have appeared more and more frequently on Chinese tables in recent years. Once China takes countermeasures against these products, the economies of France and the entire European Union will face great pressure. We all know that China has become an indispensable presence in the global market with its huge population and strong economy. Whether it is Europe, Africa, the Middle East, South America, or Southeast Asia, although some countries are following the United States in imposing sanctions on China, they cannot completely cut off ties with China because their economic development also depends on the Chinese market. Therefore, I don't think the EU has to put itself in economic difficulties for certain political relations. If the EU hopes to regain the Chinese market, it can consider reopening Chinese electric vehicles to the European market. If it simply builds trade barriers by increasing taxes, not only will global trade be affected, but the pace of green transformation will also be slowed down. To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.